For the main threat? Fuck knows.
Hamburger Hill might be the unluckiest war film ever released. Not because it was bad, but because it came out in August 1987. Platoon had won Best Picture 9 months earlier. Full Metal Jacket had hit theaters 3 months before. Every major studio looked at this script and said no. The subject matter was too emotional. People were done with Vietnam. Platoon had already said everything worth saying. But the film got made anyway. The battle it depicts took place over 10 days in May 1969. The 101st Airborne Division was ordered to take Hill 937, a position with no strategic value whatsoever. Over 11 assaults, 72 men died and 372 were wounded. The concentrated firepower was so intense that bodies were getting torn apart beyond recognition. That's where the name came from. The soldiers started calling it Hamburger Hill because of what the bodies looked like. The filmmakers wanted to show what that kind of fighting actually looked like, so they did something no Hollywood production had done before. They used real white phosphorus in the pyrotechnics. If you watch the film, the explosions look different from what you see in other war movies. They're uglier, messier, harder to watch. The Vietnam veterans of America watched it and called the action sequences startlingly realistic. The Chinese government told the director not to make this film. He made it anyway on $200,000. It's about Japan's Unit 731, the Army's biological warfare. The unit used live prisoners as test subjects. They killed thousands of people through vivisection, frostbite experiments, decompression chambers, deliberate infection with plague and anthrax. The film follows a group of Youth Corps recruits who arrive at the facility and gradually realize what's happening there. What sets this film apart is the lengths they went to for visual authenticity. There was no special effects industry in China at the time, so they obtained real cadavers through connections and used them throughout the film. They actually filmed a real autopsy of a real person with the coroners dressed in Japanese military uniforms to make it look like a vivisection. It's one of the most extreme things ever given a commercial release. It became one of the most banned and controversial films in history. Australia banned it outright. British censors cut out a 2-minute scene of a live cat being attacked by rats. It was never distributed uncut in the United States. And in Japan, the outcry got so intense that the director started receiving death threats. It took 93 years for Germany to make a German-language version of one of the most famous German books ever written. And there's a reason it took that long. The original 1930 American adaptation won Best Picture. Then the Nazis came to power and banned both the movie and the book. Owning a copy became a crime, so this story was basically erased from German cinema for almost a century. When director Edward Berger finally made the German adaptation in 2022, he wasn't interested in being tasteful about it. He said that glossing over the violence would be propaganda. Sometimes you need to be able to turn away from a movie, to be repulsed by it. You need to be physically attacked by the violence. The movie follows a 17-year-old named Paul who enlists in 1917 and gets fed into the trenches of the Western Front. If you've seen Saving Private Ryan, you know how intense that Omaha Beach landing is, those 20 minutes that feel almost impossible to sit through. Berger's film hits that same intensity, except it doesn't let up after 20 minutes. The entire second half of the movie stays at that pitch. Common Sense Media said a lot of viewers wouldn't be able to make it through the runtime, and they weren't being dramatic. The goal was to make war look so horrific that nobody could walk out thinking any of it was exciting or noble. And it worked. The film won 4 Oscars, which is more than any German film has ever won. Ray Mendoza was a Navy SEAL on a surveillance mission in Iraq in 2006. His platoon had set up in a house right next to an al-Qaeda position. When the attack came, an explosive device tore through the building and his friend Elliot Miller caught the blast. Miller's body was burned across half its surface. The brain injury was so severe he spent 4 weeks in a coma. He survived, but when he woke up, he didn't remember any of it. For years after that, Miller would email his old teammates asking them what happened. So Mendoza decided to make a movie that would show him. The film plays out in real time from the opening title card. The runtime matches exactly how long the actual mission lasted. Mendoza and his co-director interviewed the team members and made sure every single scene was confirmed by at least 2 people who were there. They didn't leave anything out. The second half is basically one long sequence of people getting hurt, and the camera never looks away. People who saw it said it was traumatizing, and they weren't ironic. This film made $154 million, which makes it the highest-grossing Navy SEAL movie ever made. But what's remarkable is what director Peter Berg did to make the violence look real. The story follows a 4-man SEAL reconnaissance team in Afghanistan in 2005. They're tracking a Taliban leader when local goat herders walk right into their position. The team debates what to do: kill the civilians or let them go. They let them go. Within an hour, they're surrounded and outnumbered. By the end, 3 of them are dead. A rescue helicopter with 16 more men has been shot down, and 1 SEAL is left crawling through the mountains with a broken back. Director Peter Berg wanted to show exactly what those men went through. He requested the actual autopsy reports from the dead SEALs and used them to recreate their wounds on screen. He brought in Greg Nicotero to handle the wound effects. If you don't know that name, he's the guy behind the practical effects on The Walking Dead, one of the best in the business. And he shot the cliff fall sequences on location with no CGI. Berg's reasoning was simple: if the real men endured it, the audience should have to watch it. The BBC tried to make this film once before. Back in 1965, they produced The War Game, a docudrama about what a nuclear attack on Britain would actually look like. They finished it, screened it for officials from the Cabinet Office and Ministry of Defense, and then the BBC pulled it from broadcast. They said it was too horrifying for the medium of broadcasting, and they kept it locked away for 20 years. 2 decades later, the BBC Director General finally watched The War Game and decided it was time to try again. So they gave a team £400,000 and told them to show the country what nuclear war actually means. What they made was Threads. It follows 2 families in Sheffield connected by an unplanned pregnancy, and then NATO and the Soviets go to war and 2 warheads hit the city. It's so graphic and so disturbing, the night it aired became known as the night the country didn't sleep. There's a scene in a hospital where a man's leg gets sawed off with a handsaw. No anesthetic. He screams through the whole thing. Multiple viewers have said that's the moment they had to turn it off. And that's not even the worst of what Threads shows you. At a press screening before broadcast, journalists walked out. They couldn't finish. The BBC aired the film one more time in 1985, and then they locked it away for nearly 20 years. The British Film Institute now calls it the most disturbing movie ever made. Joe Galloway was a reporter who covered the Battle of Ia Drang in 1965. He was there when 450 American soldiers walked into a valley where 4,000 North Vietnamese troops were dug in waiting. The battle lasted 3 days. Years later, Galloway co-wrote a book about what happened. When Hollywood decided to adapt it, Galloway came on as a consultant. He was on set for the production. He'd lived through this battle, he'd written about it, and now he was watching actors recreate it. He had to leave the set during at least one scene. He couldn't sit through something so graphic. The most disturbing scene here is when a napalm strike goes wrong. Friendly fire hits one of the American soldiers, and you watch him burn. Then Galloway's character runs over and tries to drag him to safety by his legs, and the skin comes off in his hands. The MPAA gave it an R rating for sustained sequences of graphic war violence. That designation means there's about 45 continuous minutes where the violence never lets up. Hal Moore, the commander who led those 450 men into that valley, watched the finished film and said it was the first film to get the war right. Getting it right meant showing what napalm does to a human body. When filmmakers went to make a movie about a minefield incident in Afghanistan, they visited the real paratroopers who'd been there. The soldiers told them straight to their faces, "You're going to mess this up." They were all worried about the same thing. The injuries were too real and too graphic to be shown to the public. The incident happened in 2006. A patrol crosses a dry riverbed and one soldier steps on a mine, loses his leg. His comrades rush to help. Another soldier goes back for a water bottle and hits a second mine. They call for helicopter extraction, and the wind from its rotors sets off a third mine. A fourth one goes off as soldiers try to clear a path. 4 mines total. 1 man dead, 7 with serious injuries. The MPAA rated the film R specifically for disturbing and graphic depiction of war injuries. Every mine detonation shown in full. The wrecked limbs, the wounds, the amputations. A trauma surgeon who watched it said he was hugely impressed by how precise the medical detail was. Perhaps not a compliment a filmmaker wants. Elim Klimov spent 8 years fighting Soviet censors just to get the script approved. He wanted to adapt testimony from over 300 Belarusian survivors of Nazi atrocities, and the censors kept saying no. 8 years of his life just to get permission to start. The film follows a 14-year-old boy who joins the Soviet partisans expecting adventure and glory. What he gets is an escalating nightmare with a 25-minute sequence where SS troops herd an entire village into a barn and burn them alive. Klimov used live ammunition during filming. The lead actor was a teenager at the time. He later said bullets passed within 10 centimeters of his head. The terror on his face wasn't always acting. Klimov got so worried about what he was putting this kid through that he brought in a psychotherapist to hypnotize him before the worst scenes. Roger Ebert called it one of the most devastating films ever made about anything. The Guardian said it makes Apocalypse Now look lightweight. It actually was Klimov's last film. He never directed again. When someone asked why, he said, "Everything that was possible, I felt I had already done."